When you are new to operational technology, OT, security, it is natural to assume that incident response is mostly a technical sprint where someone finds a malicious file, removes it, and everything returns to normal. In OT, incidents are often more complicated because you are not only protecting computers, you are protecting physical processes and safety outcomes, and that means response must be coordinated, deliberate, and role-driven. A good incident management framework is the structure that helps people act calmly under pressure because it defines phases of work, sets expectations for decisions, and clarifies who is responsible for what. Without a framework, teams improvise, and improvisation creates two dangerous patterns. Either people freeze because they are unsure, or people rush into actions that disrupt operations and create new hazards. In this lesson, we will focus on two frameworks that help organize OT incident management, PICERL and ICS4ICS. The goal is not to memorize acronyms for a test. The goal is to understand what each framework is trying to ensure, how it guides safe response, and how clear roles keep incidents from turning into chaos. OT incident management is as much about communication and authority as it is about tools, and frameworks provide the scaffolding for that human work. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Preparation is the phase that many beginners underestimate because it happens before anything dramatic occurs, yet it determines how well the organization performs when the pressure is real. In PICERL, preparation is about building the capability to respond, which includes having documented procedures, trained people, clear authority, and the technical prerequisites needed to investigate and contain safely. In OT, preparation also includes safety planning, knowing which actions are safe to take on control networks, knowing which systems can tolerate isolation, and knowing how to operate in degraded modes. Preparation is also where you define thresholds for escalation, such as what types of events require operations leadership involvement, what events require vendor engagement, and what events require regulatory notification. Beginners often think preparation is just writing a plan, but a plan that has never been practiced is a guess. Real preparation includes tabletop exercises, role assignments, communication templates, and pre-established relationships with vendors and support partners. It also includes ensuring that evidence sources like logs and access records exist and can be retrieved when needed. In OT, preparation is the phase where you decide whether your response will be calm and structured or frantic and risky. Identification is the phase where you determine whether something is actually an incident, what kind of incident it might be, and what the immediate risks are. This is harder than it sounds because OT environments can produce anomalies that are caused by equipment faults, misconfigurations, and normal operational changes, and those can look similar to malicious activity. PICERL emphasizes identifying incidents through observation and analysis, which in OT must include both cyber evidence and operational evidence. For example, a network anomaly might be suspicious, but if it aligns with a scheduled maintenance activity, it may be expected. Conversely, an operational anomaly like unusual process behavior might be blamed on equipment, but it could also be caused by a cyber-induced configuration change. Beginners should recognize that identification is not simply labeling something as an attack. It is building an evidence-based hypothesis that drives safe next steps. In OT, identification also includes early safety assessment. Is the process currently stable? Is there any sign of compromised safeguards? And do operators have reliable visibility? Identification is where the organization decides whether it is in a monitoring and verify posture or an urgent containment posture. Clear roles help here because identification requires input from security, operations, and engineering, and without role clarity, teams can argue instead of converging on facts. Containment is the phase where you limit damage and prevent the incident from expanding, and in OT, containment must be carefully coordinated because blunt actions can create operational hazards. PICERL containment can include isolating systems, restricting remote access, disabling compromised accounts, and segmenting networks more tightly to prevent lateral movement. The beginner pitfall is thinking containment always means shutting everything down, when in OT the safest containment may be targeted and incremental. If you isolate a system that provides critical visibility, operators might lose the ability to monitor the process safely, which could be more dangerous than the suspected cyber activity. So containment decisions should be tied to criticality and operational dependence. This is where clear roles become essential, because security teams might focus on stopping attacker movement, while operations teams focus on maintaining safe control, and both goals must be balanced. A strong framework provides the shared language to balance them, such as distinguishing between short-term containment to stop the bleeding and longer-term containment that prevents recurrence. In OT, containment also often involves vendor coordination because proprietary systems may require vendor guidance for safe isolation steps. The key lesson is that containment is not a single action. It is a controlled set of actions chosen to reduce risk without breaking safety. Eradication is the phase where you remove the attacker's presence or the root cause of the incident, such as malware, compromised accounts, or malicious persistence mechanisms. In OT, eradication can be complicated because some systems cannot be easily re-imaged, some devices have limited maintenance windows, and some components require careful validation before changes are made. Beginners sometimes assume eradication is a quick cleanup, but in high-consequence environments, eradication is often cautious and staged. For example, if a workstation is compromised, you might plan to rebuild it, but you also need to verify that rebuilding will not break engineering workflows needed for safe operation. If credentials are compromised, you might need to reset them, but you must ensure that legitimate automation and service accounts do not break in ways that cause operational disruption. Eradication also requires evidence-based thinking, because removing a visible malware artifact does not guarantee that the attacker's access is gone. In OT, attackers may use valid credentials and legitimate tools, leaving minimal traces. So eradication should be tied to a clear understanding of initial access, lateral movement pathways, and what must be changed to prevent reentry. Clear roles matter here because eradication touches identity, systems, and sometimes process operations, and without coordination, teams can remove the wrong thing or remove something at the wrong time. Recovery is the phase where you return systems to normal operation, and in OT recovery must include trust restoration, not just functionality restoration. A system that boots and runs is not necessarily a system you can trust to control a process safely. Recovery includes restoring systems from known good states, validating configurations, verifying controller logic and safety functions, and ensuring monitoring is accurate. Beginners often think recovery means turning everything back on as quickly as possible, but in OT the safer approach is often to restore in a controlled order, validating critical dependencies first. For example, restoring visibility and control pathways might be prioritized before restoring convenience reporting systems. Recovery also includes monitoring for recurrence because attackers sometimes leave delayed mechanisms or attempt reentry after initial containment. A recovery plan should also include clear handoff criteria. Who declares that operations can resume fully, what evidence supports that decision, and what monitoring will continue afterward. This is where frameworks help because they provide a shared understanding that recovery is a phase with requirements, not just a moment. Clear roles ensure that operations leaders, engineers, and security staff agree on what recovered means in terms of safety and integrity. Lessons learned is the final phase in PICERL, and it is where the organization turns a painful event into improved resilience rather than repeating the same mistakes. In OT, lessons learned should address both technical and procedural issues because incidents often reveal gaps in access governance, asset visibility, documentation, and decision authority. Beginners sometimes treat this phase as a blame session, but a strong framework treats it as a structured review focused on improving controls, clarifying roles, and adjusting procedures. Lessons learned should include reviewing what evidence was available, what evidence was missing, and how that affected decisions. It should include reviewing which containment steps worked and which created operational friction. It should also include reviewing communication, because communication failures can cause delays and confusion that amplify impact. In OT, lessons learned might also involve updating safety-related procedures, vendor support agreements, and recovery runbooks. The goal is to harden the organization's ability to respond safely the next time, because in complex environments, incidents are not hypothetical. When lessons learned is done well, it builds trust between teams because it shows that the organization values improvement over blame. That trust makes future responses faster and calmer. Now let's connect this to ICS4ICS, which is a framework concept that emphasizes the unique needs of incident response in industrial control environments, particularly the need to integrate cyber response with operational safety and process knowledge. The specific wording and structure of ICS4ICS can vary depending on how an organization adopts it, but the core idea is consistent. Incident response for industrial control systems should be designed for industrial reality, not borrowed unmodified from enterprise IT. That means roles and procedures must reflect the fact that operators and engineers are not just customers of security. They are central decision makers because they understand the process, the safety limits, and the consequences of certain actions. It also means that the response must consider physical outcomes and safety constraints at every stage, not only during recovery. ICS4ICS thinking encourages a blended team approach that includes security analysts, control engineers, operations leadership, and often facilities and safety personnel, because incidents can affect more than networks. For beginners, the key takeaway is that an industrial incident framework must explicitly incorporate operational roles and safety decision gates, because that is what prevents cyber response actions from creating new hazards. Clear roles are what make both PICERL and an ICS-focused approach work in practice, because frameworks are only useful when people know who decides, who executes, and who communicates. In OT, role clarity is especially important because authority can be distributed across organizations in shifts, and because external parties like vendors may play significant roles during incidents. A useful way to think about roles is to separate strategic authority, operational authority, technical execution, and safety oversight. Strategic authority might involve leadership deciding overall priorities, such as whether to shut down a process or continue under monitoring. Operational authority often involves control room leadership, and engineering leads determining what actions are safe for the process. Technical execution involves security and IT staff performing containment and eradication tasks in the digital domain, and it also involves engineers validating control logic and configurations. Safety oversight ensures that decisions align with safety requirements and that emergency procedures are considered when risk is high. Beginners should understand that if these roles are not defined, incidents can devolve into conflicts, such as security wanting to isolate a system while operations insists it cannot be touched. Role clarity does not eliminate disagreement, but it provides a structured way to resolve it quickly with evidence and responsibility. Communication roles are also crucial because in OT, the people who need information are not always the people who produce it. Operators need to know whether monitoring remains trustworthy and whether any process changes are expected. Engineers need to know what systems might have been accessed and what needs verification. Security needs to know what operational changes are planned so they can interpret telemetry correctly. Leadership needs to know the business and safety implications of different response options. External parties may need to be notified based on regulation, contractual obligations, or public safety considerations. Frameworks support this by encouraging defined communication paths and escalation criteria, but roles make it concrete by assigning who communicates what, to whom, and when. Beginners often focus on technical actions, but communication is a technical control in the sense that it shapes what actions happen and in what order. Poor communication can cause duplicated effort, conflicting actions, and missed evidence collection, all of which can amplify impact. Clear roles help preserve evidence integrity because people know when to capture information and who is responsible for maintaining chain of custody. In OT, evidence can be needed not only for internal learning, but also for regulatory reporting and legal obligations. So role-driven communication protects the organization. Another subtle but important idea is that frameworks support decision pacing, which is the ability to slow down enough to be safe without being so slow that risk grows. PICERL and ICS-focused practices both encourage controlled progression through phases rather than jumping straight to eradication or recovery without understanding what happened. Beginners sometimes think speed is always the priority, but in OT, safe speed is the priority. Safe speed means you contain quickly where you can without breaking operations. You identify carefully so you do not chase the wrong cause, and you recover only when trust is restored. This is why phase-based frameworks matter. They create a shared expectation that certain questions must be answered before moving forward. For example, before you restore a system to service, you should be confident that it is clean and correctly configured, and you should know whether it is safe to reconnect it to critical networks. Before you disable an access path, you should know whether operations depends on it for safety-critical functions. These are not delays for their own sake. They are safety checks. Clear roles ensure that the right experts participate in these decision gates, preventing decisions from being made in isolation by people who do not see the full consequence. When you step back, the value of PICERL and ICS-focused incident management approaches is that they turn chaotic events into managed processes with clear responsibilities and safety-aware decision points. Preparation ensures you have people, procedures, and evidence sources ready before pressure arrives. Identification builds an evidence-based understanding of what is happening and how it could affect safety and operations. Containment limits spread while respecting operational dependencies and safety constraints. Eradication removes the root cause and reduces the chance of reentry without creating new instability. Recovery restores systems and trust through controlled validation, not just through rebooting. Lessons learned transforms the experience into better resilience and clearer roles. ICS4ICS thinking reinforces that in industrial environments, these phases must explicitly include operations and engineering perspectives because physical consequences and safety constraints change what safe response looks like. For new learners, the most important takeaway is that incident management in OT is not a solo technical act. It is a coordinated, role-driven practice designed to protect both systems and people. When frameworks are understood and roles are clear, teams can respond faster, make safer choices, and return to reliable operation with trust they can prove rather than trust they hope for.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.